In today's world, we are increasingly dependent on technology. Our business and personal lives rely on it, but as you've probably noticed, it's unreliable. Our computers are slow, so we end up squinting at smartphones and tablets. The jokers we pay to fix our stuff have no clue what they're doing. We live in constant fear that something's going to happen to our personal data. So we're scared into paying for fake protection that proves useless when disaster strikes. Update attacks, fake Wi-Fi, cloud control, intelligent, successful people feel intimidated by the chaos and think it's somehow their fault. If they only knew what the industry was doing to them, they'd get torches and pitchforks. If only we had someone to explain it all in plain English so we can start protecting ourselves. Oh wait, we do! It's the Computer Exorcist Podcast with your host, Mark Anthony Arena.
From the Wallace Memorial microphone in my living room, overlooking the Can of Worms in downtown Rochester, New York, this is the Computer Exorcist Podcast. My name is Mark Anthony Arena, and I am so glad you have joined us today. I have on the line one of my longtime clients. His name is Brian Cooley, and we got to talking the other day. And he let me know he is now into beekeeping, and he was saying some really fascinating things. And I said, hold that thought. I want you to say it on the show. So what we'll do today is, Brian, I'm going to ask you to give us a little intro about yourself and how you got into beekeeping and what the current situation is and what that guy told you at that hardware store that time. So welcome aboard.
Very good. Okay, so in the Wayback Machine, I was about 8 years old when my dad started beekeeping. He got into it as a hobby, perhaps, and maybe with the idea that it would become some sort of profitable small business. And that was at a time that was called now the Golden Age of Beekeeping, because all you had to do was put out a hive and put some bees in it, and they would make honey for you in profusion. And there were no pests. There was one disease we worried about only, American foul brood. And the bee inspectors came out every year and checked to make sure you didn't have it. And so at 8 years old, I hung out with my dad while he worked on the bees. And I can't say that I really did a lot. If he said to me, say, go pick that up, or, you know, move that over there, or as I grew up, got older, I did a little more. But when you stand around with someone who's doing something, you learn as much by osmosis as by doing. And so I was involved in it in a little way until I left home about 17. So I had 9 years of experience back then. And then time passed, and about 4 years ago, a storm blew a tree down and it had a beehive in it, and I got involved, cut the tree up, stood the stump up, came back in a couple of weeks and cut the hive out and transferred it into a regular beehive. And that was my return to beekeeping 4 years ago, and it has gone on since then. And I wanted to give a little bit of historical that back in the 60s, when I was 8 years old, it was referred to as the Golden Age of Beekeeping. There were virtually no diseases, no pests, and all you had to do was have a hive and you would get honey. And that has passed. But going in deeper history, I just want to give an overview into beekeeping as a whole. It's been going on for thousands of years. They kept bees in Egypt.
Oh, yeah.
There was honey placed in the tombs of Egyptian pharaohs and important folks, and after 3,000 or 4,000 years in the tomb, the honey was unspoiled, and they opened it up and said, "Very nice, very sweet."
Yeah, how? And they were able to ingest it safely?
They put it in their jars and then tuck it in there, and nothing's happened to it. It does not spoil.
Wow.
Honey is antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal. There's actual protocols for treating wounds with it.
Really? So if I have athlete's foot, I can apply some honey to my feet?
I'm not sure if you want to have sticky feet, but
Huh.
But nothing grows in honey.
Huh.
If it's of the appropriate moisture content, it won't ferment. It won't spoil. So it's an incredible substance, and we'll get into more of that later. So back in Europe, at the time they were building all those wonderful cathedrals, they would actually, in the stonework, they would leave voids, and then they would have holes drilled in to allow bees to move into the stonework of the cathedrals. And then in other places, they actually built little sheds out of stone for the bees to nest in.
Wow. I never knew that. And here I am worrying about all the holes in my house as the bees come in and out of them, but they did it on purpose. Wow.
Yeah, so the church had an affinity for the bees, and the pharaohs had an affinity for the bees, and they say that Tutankhamun actually was. This is something I just read and haven't verified, but that he was remarked to be a beekeeper. Okay. King Tut, beekeeper.
Wow.
A certain Johann, later Gregor Mendel, who is regarded as the father of genetics for his work with bees and honeybees in the 1800s. He was an Augustinian friar from St. Thomas Abbey in Brno, which is now in the Czech Republic. And Mendel, his beekeeping began in childhood like mine, and his father, Anton, was a peasant farmer who was required to work for his landlord 3 days a week, and Johann assisted his father, and when he was 21, he joined the abbey under Abbot Cyril Franz Knapp, and they worked on hybridizing various things, like sheep, hybridized their sheep so that they could get better wool, and the honeybees and bees to increase the revenue from the abbey's land holdings.
Wow. And I knew he did work with peas, but I didn't know anything else.
They went on, so the history of this is a lot of people have put a lot of effort into beekeeping, and things have gotten way better until recently. And now we have pests, and there's the bee pests are Varroa destructor. That's the Latin name for the Varroa mite, and Athena tumida, which is the small hive beetle. And these pests destroy hives and kill the bees.
All right, so
and most importantly, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Go ahead.
Now the pesticides, in particular, one in particular, they're called Neonicotinoids, which they're a synthetic nicotine, which is neurotoxic to all invertebrates, amphibians, and apparently to humans as well. And it is the number one applied pesticide worldwide, and it's persistent in soil and water. It moves into the plant through absorption, and shows up in the nectar, the pollen, and the plant tissue itself, and it's devastating to bees.
All right, let me ask you now, because years ago I talked to this lady at a cafe out of the blue, and classic Rochester lady just walked up to me and just starts talking about things randomly, and I had to sit there. But one of the things she mentioned was that she thought that the cell towers, these cell phone towers out there, are killing the bees. So I've heard of that, and I know we have zillions of pesticides in all our foods, so I've heard of that. But you're telling me, do you think either of those is also at fault, or is it just this synthetic nicotine that they're using that's killing these bees?
So what we're faced with is this intersection of all these things impacting the environment and the bees, and I would say incrementally and now all at once. And so there's this 5G saturation. It's everywhere. Mm-hmm. And we don't know, because they of course tell us, oh no, it couldn't possibly be that.
But how many big pharma places say, oh no, it couldn't possibly be us, right?
Oh no, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't cause autism or myocarditis or any of that foolishness. But there's something that's famously called lost bee syndrome, where the bees fly out and then they can't find their way home.
Okay, so maybe that affects them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have like GPS. And when they leave the hive for the first time, they fly out backwards, and they fly out and back in, and fly out and back in backwards, and they fix their location in space within a matter of 3 feet. They know where they are.
Whoa!
I can have multiple hives that are only, the front entrances are only 24 inches apart, and they go in their front door and don't go in the other.
That's incredible that they know exactly where they are.
They're absolutely astounding creatures, and I have a question that I ask all the time. It's a rhetorical question. I don't know the answer, and neither does anybody else. What's in the head of a bee? Because there's a lot going on in there.
Great point. Think about the computing power, like a microchip. These little tiny bee brains that can do incredible things. This pinpointing their location and do all the things that they do.
And when they find a food source, nectar or pollen, they know exactly where it is. So they will come back to the hive. They'll tell all the girls, "This is where it is." They communicate, and then they go back to it, and they fly direct. They don't take detours once they find it, and they work that spot until they're done with it. And they fly in a 3-mile radius from the hive. So you can put a circle around the hives and say the bees will now travel as far as 3 miles and back and forth and do it repetitively. And they will make as many, in the course of their life, as many as 1,000 trips up to 3 miles out and 3 miles back.
Wow.
Which would be 6,000 miles flying.
What?
And over their life produce 1 teaspoon of honey.
That's it?
Yeah, for each bee. And that's why it takes 50 to 80,000 of them in a hive, because they got to stay busy.
Wow.
In the spring and summertime, they live 42 days approximately. In the winter, when they winter over in the hive, they can last for 5 months.
So in its lifetime, a honeybee only makes 1 teaspoon of honey.
That's it. It's a process. So first they bring the nectar in, and then the bees in the hive, they sit in there and they fan their wings and they evaporate the excess water, which then leaves the hive, and they when it gets to a certain water content, the lowest 17% or whatever, then they cap it, and that's honey. And it's just the distilled nectar of the flower.
Oh,
so,
I was wondering what it was made out of.
And incorporated in there are little particles of pollen that they pick up off from the flower itself. Mm-hmm. They collect the pollen to feed it to their babies.
Really? So that's what they use it for. They accumulate the food for their own babies. Wow.
Oh yeah, and they're so good at this accumulation of honey that there's an excess. So I've been told that vegans will not eat honey because you're stealing the work of the bees.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I think at this point, I'm not in the debt of the bees for all that I do for them. So
that's a great point. If you're doing so much to keep these guys alive, and on top of that, you're only taking from their excess, that's really fascinating. I mean, I personally, I wouldn't go near bees because I just don't want to get stung and all that stuff. But it's a hugely important thing. And so let's go back a second to that particular pesticide. What was it meant to do, and what do you think it's doing, right? Where apparently beekeepers are applying it everywhere thinking they're helping, but it ends up destroying, correct?
No, it's not beekeepers. It's everywhere. It's in every home and garden. It's in, they sell it, if you're a lawn and landscape operator, you have to take a class. And you have to learn about the appropriate application of this pesticide. And it's also applied to seeds. And so it's persistent in the environment. It doesn't break down. It lasts for years. And it has a devastating effect on all invertebrates, and particularly our favorite butterflies and pollinators. But in the lawn and garden business, they apply it to your lawn to get rid of those pesky grubs that are eating the roots of your grass plant.
So here they are thinking they're helping your lawn.
Yeah, we got to have that perfect lawn.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of lawn guys say, and maybe you say this as well to me, but I've heard a lot of lawn guys say that manicured green homogenized lawn is totally unsustainable in the long term.
Well, I can attest to that. Without the application of herbicides and pesticides, I'd say that's the case. I'm doing the best I can without doing that, and I'd say I'm losing, but I've given up on that. One of my friends said green is good, so it doesn't really matter what brand of green, but that Kentucky bluegrass, that beautiful lawn that everybody thinks they're aspiring for is well, anyway.
And it was a synthetic nicotine, correct? What was it called?
It's called a neonicotinoid.
Neonicotinoid,
and you can look it up. Incorporated in it is the nicotinoid. That's the nicotine part, and you can look it up and read all about it. I've been bombing everybody I know with a posting that I pulled off the internet that talks about it and what terrible damage it's doing to the bees. And really, the most important aspect of this is that we have had an unprecedented, historic collapse of bees this last winter. And in California, one commercial beekeeper, he had 20,000 hives in the fall. He has 1,000 left now that are alive. The other 19,000 are all dead.
What?
Lost them all over the course of the winter. And he says he's done. He's not going to do it anymore. He can't afford it. I went online to look and see where you could buy bees from the suppliers, Man Lake and Better Bee, and they're sold out for the season.
Is this a national or
how many they had to start?
Is this national or global? This collapse?
Well, it's national for sure, but the implications that I'm not plugged in all the way, but I've been told. I thought it was a New York problem, maybe a Western New York problem, and that started like 2.5 months ago. I was hearing 80% hive collapse or more, some people losing all. I thought it was local, and then I thought it was New York, and then I found out it was the United States, and a couple weeks ago I heard, yeah, it's worldwide.
Wow, because I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out as a troubleshooter, right? Whenever I look at this, especially with these macro level problems, I'm a troubleshooter with my own industry, and I say, okay, where's it coming from? Is it localized? Is it here? Maybe it's only in countries that use neonicotinoids, or where's it coming from? Or maybe it's just that the chemicals spread globally, because that's what they do. Tell me about your hive, because I believe you've had a better success rate than the average, correct? Tell me about that and what you're doing differently.
So I started out in the fall with 8 hives, and one of them was a very small swarm that I collected at the end of last part of July last year, and the colony was never thriving. It just barely hung on, and so I gave it a 50-50 chance of making it through the winter with a lot of attention, and it was alive up until there was a couple of worm spells in maybe middle of February. I checked on it; it was still alive, but not thriving. And then later, it was down to like 200 bees. It was done. And then I thought all my other hives were going to make it, and then I checked one of them, and the queen was gone. She died, caught a cold. I don't know. And so then I combined that. The bees of that hive with another weak hive, and I managed to pull 6 through the season. And so that's a 2 out of 6. That's a 20, or 2 out of 8. That's a 25% loss, which that's with a lot of effort to make sure that I did everything I could to give them high probability, and I did way better than a lot of people. Like, when you're losing 90% or 100% of all your bees, you have, it's devastating.
So, what do you think you did differently? This people need to know. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So the first thing I did. This is when you get into this discussion. If you're a large, for instance, thousands of hives or just 1,000 hives, how much time and effort do you have for each individual hive? I only have the 8, so my time gets, I can spread it pretty thick. And so one of the things that's very important is to make sure that there are no varroa mites in your hive going into the winter, because they're parasitic. They suck the life out of the bee. And they propagate inside the hive. When I first got started, I went after a product that's sold, and it's advertised to control and get rid of all the mites, and I found out that it gets rid of all the mites and the queen and the brood and the bees, and in the end you end up with, I've been told by the people that sell it that, oh yeah, we use that and it works fine for us. And I have a list of things that I consider individual self-interest is like the main motivator for most of us.
Just like my industry, there's all these individuals acting in their own self-interest, and they're all individually pushing garbage onto people who don't need it, and they're individually participating in corrupting the whole industry. So I get that absolutely, even if it's damaging long-term in the bigger picture.
I'd like to look at maybe individual self-interest could actually be altruistic.
Right, I try to teach people, hey, you can actually make more money by actually helping the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So small business kind of changes that to a degree. So now you got profit and loss implications, and how sustainable is your business if you lose that? How much can you afford to lose before you're done? And then the next step is corporate, and corporate is entirely different because they're impersonal. They don't care. And I think greed becomes the motivator. And if I can make money and I can improve the dividends paid to my stockholders, well, I'll just keep making neonicotinoids and have it sprayed and more Roundup. And so anyways, the bees are incredibly sensitive, and just a little bit can push them the wrong way.
Oh yeah, imagine it's
So,
absolutely they're sensitive. Yeah.
I wanted to go into a few personal interactions I've had with bees. I get stung once in a while. I don't get stung a lot most days. Usually once is enough to get my mind right. But in the springtime, I've gone out and the bees, the girls come out and they start landing on me and crawling around on me. And I might have 40 bees on the front of me, and they're crawling around and smelling me. Getting to know me because I'm the beekeeper, and they know that. Wow! And it's quite a thing, a relationship with the bee. Wow! And every once in a while, one will come and it'll one hit me in the eyebrow, and I said, "Oh, got the message. Yes, I'm out of here." Another one hit me in the cheek. They didn't sting me. They slammed into me. Another one in the back of the head. And they're saying, "Look, you're too close. We don't like that. You should move." And as long as I take the hint, we're good.
And they're able to give a gentle warning, so to speak, without actually. Wow.
Well, yeah, and I've had the other ones where it doesn't matter what I do, they're coming to sting me. They're pissed. And as my cousin says, there's always one with something to prove. And I said, "What?" And they have a signed excuse that says, "I'm on guard duty."
So do you think there is really one designated guard?
Oh no, it's a whole class of bee.
Really?
Hang out by the front door and say, "Yeah, come on over here. I have something to show you." But I had another one that came and stopped within 3 inches of my eyeball and hovered and looked into me. I into it and it into me, and I said, "I think the bee was looking at my soul."
I love it when I'll put my finger in front of a fish tank and the fish follows my finger. I love that level of interaction, but this is really profound.
Yeah, and bees communicate, and they, people think they understand how bees communicate, and they've done these little studies about the wiggle and the waggle and how they come back. And there's actual school held in front of the hive every day in the warm weather.
What?
Usually around 3 o'clock, maybe 4 o'clock. And there'll be 2,000 bees crawling on the front of the hive and flying around, and they're going out, and it's a schoolyard where the bees communicate with all the stuff they need to know, talk to the girls about where stuff is, and I begin to wonder if maybe there's more to the thing. Maybe there's a hive mind. How are decisions made? When they decide to swarm, half the hive gets up and leaves all at once with a queen. And we are told that the queen doesn't make these decisions. I'm not sure. Maybe she does sometimes.
But there's obviously some communication going on here. That the part about the schoolyard, that's incredible.
There's a massive amount of communication.
Wow.
And so I have someone that I follow, and her name is Erica Thompson of Texas Bee Works. Everybody should check her out. She's awesome. I think she's a bee charmer. A bee charmer. You may only be able to be a bee charmer if you're a woman. I'm not sure yet. But if you check her out, you'll find out why I say these things. She recently posted, "We really need people to plant flowers. That we need to get, people should put out as many flowering plants, flowering trees as they can, to give resources to the bees that remain, and then also provide them these things in an area which is as devoid as possible of pesticides, herbicides, etc."
Wow.
So,
And that's a beautiful way to conclude it, is what can we do to help, right? All these things, when you read the news, it's all things to make you feel helpless, right? But here's something where we have a catastrophic, devastating collapse of the bees on Earth, and there is something you can do about it. Plant some flowers, start a beehive, do something. And again, it's all about less is more, right? We, as you know, right, we all grew up for the past century hearing better living through chemistry. And people just come up with these ideas and don't understand the consequences, or maybe the long-term consequences took a long time to manifest. But either way, we're in this. And this is here's how I'm going to tie it all into my industry, folks. As you know, I always do. Is number one, coming up with random ideas and not even realizing there could be consequences, right? With every update attack on every computer, every kind of thing that's invented, every kind of harebrained scheme that my industry comes up with, there are consequences that they just don't bother to realize. Number two, and here's hugely important, and this I'll tie in with our article here. It's a quick headline here. Norton LifeLock completes merger with Avast, and that happened in 2022. It's been in the briefcase for a while, but I wanted to find an article appropriate to Brian today, and that was it. That headline right there is appropriate, because if you know my whole message here, what we just talked about a few minutes ago, where you walk into a hardware store and you buy that particular pesticide that tries to fight off those mites, those parasites, right? And what is the name of that chemical that fights the parasites, by the way?
Well, they have. There's a whole class of them, but
okay.
One of them is Formic Pro.
Okay.
And it exudes formic acid as a gas.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right, so it's a whole class of things. Okay, so here's what I'm going to tie this into. It's the same thing here. Even if you don't use Norton or Avast or whatever, and it's their McAfee and WebRoot and all that, it's not just one brand. It's an entire class of products that claim to help your computer, but inevitably cannot help you and end up destroying the computer prematurely. That's how I'm going to tie it together. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
Awesome. I mean, as soon as you said that, it all tied in, because I'm doing the same thing for my industry, where it's, hey folks, people are out there selling you something in order to make money. So half of them know that it helps, the other half knows that it's destructive. I don't know what the number is, but some of them know it helps, but they're just out there trying to make money, thinking that that's the only way to make money, and they're selling you a product that destroys your computer. It aims to protect you, it claims to protect you, and then it destroys. And then you've got all these, I say it all the time, these 1, 2, 3-year-old computers that are horrendously slow. I had a lady call me yesterday, hey Mark, I got 2 laptops, one of them needed an overhaul, that's fine. The other one, she said, yeah, I had brought it to a computer guy last year, and he put Windows 10, and he put Norton and McAfee on there, and it's horrendously slow. And he kicked me out of the door with a kick in the pants and said, hey, you're all set, here's your fresh computer. But it was horribly slow, and she said, do I put it in the garbage? And I said, no, we'll make it work. So just remove those pesticides. Final thoughts, Beekeeper Brian Cooley.
Well, I'm starting to look at this as a very important situation, where I think if people are interested in getting involved in beekeeping, I have learned so much in the last 4 years. We build what we do on top of the work of other people, and I have learned so much. And if someone was interested in getting into it, then I think they should probably get involved in a forum, or they can contact me. And I'm at B-E-E Cooley, beecooley23@gmail.com.
beecooley23@gmail.com.
I could give you some tips.
That's so cool. So beecooley23@gmail.com, correct?
Yeah. So technology, generally, we think that technology is going to bring us improvement, and then maybe we find out it only brings intrusion, and so it's the dichotomy. where we find ourselves. We want to do well, but then we also have these things that work against us. And right now, for the honeybees, it's real important that we get our acts together and get it straightened out.
Wow.
It comes from there.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many uses for it, right? That's incredible. And, as you say this, right, it's not just technology, because I know that we're crazed about technology right now, and it's the emperor's new clothes, and it's a bandwagon, but it could be anything, right? I spent a lot of years thinking that more is more, right? I would keep buying books and buying DVDs and buying this and buying that and accumulating, and that's great, but I can only digest so many books and movies at a time, and accumulating anything will clutter up your life, will clog your life. And in the past year or two, I've actually the past 4 or 5 years, I've been getting rid of a ton of clutter so that I can focus on enjoying a few things, right? Or I'll go on vacation so I can focus on writing books. So it's not just technology, but anything that we buy or accumulate that we think is going to improve our lives won't always do that. Well, thank you so much. What a fascinating discussion. You are a new friend of the show, and you're welcome back anytime. And thanks so much for your time, Brian.
Well, thank you for having me.
Buy my book at thecomputerexorcist.com. Tell all your friends, and you can also buy the preview edition of my next book. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you next week.